Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Patty. I am a senior coordinator with the Mattress Recycling Council in California. I'm going to be moderating this session today. We have two great speakers for the hard to recycle session that we're currently in. The first speaker is Dr. Calvin Lacken. He's currently the co-investigator of the Waste Wiki project at York University, a research project devoted to advancing understanding of waste management research and policy in Canada. Calvin has authored 27 academic papers and more than 75 white papers and technical reports. He recently did a white paper for the Mattress Recycling Council, and he's going to be talking a little bit about that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lacken. And I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, we're going to do the questions at the end of the session, and you can put those into the chat feature. And at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes to ask both of our speakers questions about the material that they're sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Mark. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very kindly for the opportunity to present to you today. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this panel. I am having some technical issues, so luckily Jeremy will be navigating my slides for me. So next slide. So the impetus of this research was that York University was retained to conduct a study on illegal dumping of durable goods, with the goal to better understand the drivers of illegal dumping, as well as identifying best practices for mitigating against illegal dumping in communities. We had the opportunity to retain several subject area experts, as well as conduct a comprehensive behavioral study of illegal dumping in communities in Ontario. Next slide, please. Our study identified 4 drivers of illegal dumping, which include lack of infrastructure. This is perhaps the most primary driver of illegal dumping, as convenience is the most significant predictor of illegal dumping behavior. The less convenient it is to properly dispose of waste, the more likely people are to engage in illegal dumping. Incidences of illegal dumping are highest in areas with the fewest designated collection drop-off points and tend to be higher in rural and remote areas as well. Lack of awareness is also a huge issue, as many households report not knowing where to properly dispose of durable waste and difficult to recycle items, which ultimately contributes to illegal dumping. This can lead to frustration within the community, particularly when expectations of when and where to dump durable waste are not made clear. Next slide, please. So a lack of enforcement is also observed to contribute to higher incidences of illegal dumping, with illegal dumping much more prevalent in areas which lack supervision or where penalties for illegal dumping are not enforced. And lastly, a lack of normative pressure or peer pressure was seen as contributing to illegal dumping, and individuals' willingness to engage in illegal dumping waste is a function of whether a public space is being maintained and whether that space is perceived to be a communal space. Monitoring from neighbors in the community has also been seen to be a deterrent of illegal dumping, which is why normative pressure is such a critical component. Next slide, please. What was really interesting about our study is that the underlying drivers of illegal dumping are a combination of infrastructural, behavioral, and socioeconomic factors. So drivers of illegal dumping include the barriers to properly disposal, so high disposal fees, lack of curbside collection services, inconvenient collection sites, etc., as well as site and situation-specific characteristics. Is the area poorly maintained? Is there a lack of community ownership of public spaces? Also playing a role in illegal dumping are socioeconomic factors, so dense populations, high mobility rates among residents, and attitudes about illegal dumping in the environment. Illegal dumping results from some combination of these factors. Research shows that residents generally agree that illegal dumping is wrong and should be avoided when possible, and that those who have participated in illegal dumping express some degree of guilt or remorse for doing so. And it's really critical that we understand these attitudes as remedial strategies are developed and implemented. Policymakers and other stakeholders need to understand that illegal dumping is based on a series of decisions that follow a path of least resistance. Because of this, there are multiple opportunities to divert residents from the path that leads to illegal dumping and onto a path where the destination is legal disposal through appropriate collection channels. Next slide, please. So addressing illegal dumping requires a multifaceted approach. There's no single solution. So there's prevention versus mitigation, fostering awareness among community and focusing on community engagement, encouraging stakeholder collaborations, and enacting appropriate policies and legislation, and ensuring that there's effective enforcement measures. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we need a coordinated approach. Stakeholder collaboration is absolutely critical. A coordinated approach across multiple stakeholders, jurisdictions, and agencies is likely to be the most effective option. It's also important to note that prevention is significantly less costly than remediation. As such, emphasis should be placed on preventing illegal dumping as opposed to reactionary responses. Part of stakeholder collaboration is getting on the same page. We need to understand the size, scale, and scope of the problem to determine what data we have and what data should be tracked. Stakeholders should identify problem areas and develop appropriate prevention and mitigation strategies. The community also needs to be part of your stakeholder group. Residents should be consulted to gauge which factors they think contribute to illegal dumping and what can be done to address the issue. Next slide, please.
Cal, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. The success of any initiative designed to encourage illegal dumping is to improve access to proper disposal options. As noted earlier, the most significant predictor of illegal dumping is a lack of convenient, low or no cost disposal options for households. Local jurisdictions need to ensure that residents have readily available access to proper waste disposal options, with a combination of collection strategies being the most effective approach. Next slide, please. An effective strategy for deterring illegal dumping is also to raise awareness. Adequate waste collection services must be accompanied by clear and consistent promotion and education initiatives that builds community support for proper disposal of durable waste. Households need to understand why illegal dumping is an issue, including environmental, economic, and social impacts to the broader community. Next slide, please. Effective enforcement is also a critical component of developing an effective illegal dumping prevention strategy. And one of the first steps to improving enforcement is to train local authorities to fully understand the broader consequences of illegal dumping. In doing so, law enforcement needs to review the efficacy of existing laws and identify what changes need to be made in order to deter illegal dumping. Next slide, please. So for the purposes of brevity, I'll kind of skip over this slide, but I encourage many of you to read the accompanying report, which kind of elaborates on some of the additional prevention strategies that can mitigate against illegal dumping. So I encourage you to read that report. And next slide, please. And so in conclusion, illegal dumping is a really complex issue driven by a multitude of factors necessitating multifaceted solutions. Illegal dumping of durable goods can be addressed most effectively through a comprehensive, collaborative, and inclusive approach. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much, Cal. We really appreciate you sharing that information with us. I'm going to move over to Justin Stockdale. Justin Stockdale is he is with EcoCycle as the director of the CHARM program. For those of you that are not aware of what CHARM is, CHARM stands for the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials. It's based in Boulder, Colorado. Justin has over 20 years experience in the solid waste world. He's committed to finding pragmatic and attainable solutions to waste-related issues. It's been demonstrated across his long career. For the implementation of his work as a consultant to the imaginative leadership he has proven within local government and nonprofit organizations. So I'd like to welcome Justin, and we all look forward to hearing your presentation.
Alvin, thank you. And I'm going to take a brief technical difficulty moment to get my slides up here. To be expected when you let me loose in technology. So as Mark said, I manage the CHARM facility here in Boulder, Colorado, and sort of the intersection between CHARM and Calvin's research is that CHARM or facilities like CHARM are ultimately designed to both disrupt illegal dumping, but also legal dumping. So a lot of the materials that we collect, you can see on the screen, are very commonly illegally disposed items, but there's also a whole range of materials that we're collecting that are rarely appearing in illegal dump sites. But certainly we can prevent from going to a landfill disposal solution. So CHARM the facility was founded in 2001 here at EcoCycle. EcoCycle started in 1976 with a curbside recycling program in Boulder. In 01, we had a handful of materials. Really, this is an era when electronic waste became a thing, or electronic scrap. So our primary materials at our start were electronic based. Today that's evolved to over 24 materials, many of which have subclasses and subcategories. So in total, it's probably closer to 35 different discrete materials. I want to talk a bit about sort of the underpinning structure of CHARM, how it works, why it works. And I think probably the first piece of a successful recovery facility for these challenging materials is a fee structure, right? So at CHARM, we are what we call a social enterprise. Our goal or our role in the organization is to, one, recover materials, but two, do so in a manner which generates at least a modest income stream to reinvest in our other programs here at EcoCycle, as well as into the program of CHARM itself. So that social enterprise and CHARM depends on really three primary funding sources. One is user fees. So this image is a list of our fee schedule at CHARM. And that fee schedule is broken down into really two categories. There's a facility fee, which covers almost any transaction. So any customer coming to CHARM is going to pay a $3 facility fee. That is our baseline revenue stream to cover the light bill, the forklift fuel, the rest of the operation. And then there are incremental fees for materials generally that have a cost to manage properly. So in Mark's wheelhouse, mattresses don't have enough residual value in the commodity as a commodity. So we charge a incremental fee for every mattress we receive to cover the cost, to dismantle, to ship, to recycle, and to manage that material. And that is probably 50% of the materials we handle include an incremental. Second leg of this stool is material sales. So a lot of these materials do have some value in them. We recover that value: cardboard, books, even things as rigid white EPS foam. We recover some residual commodity value, which also helps underpin our finances. And the third leg is a blend of philanthropy and contractual relationships. So we operate this site on behalf of the city of Boulder. So we have some funding directly from the city. We also, as a nonprofit, are actively always soliciting financial contributions to support the work. So this fee structure really is focused on, and you can surmise it's a residential facility. So we'll see some pictures, images of the site here in a second, but really our focus as we started was on residential sourced material. That has evolved greatly over time in our 20 years of history. We now have a 2-truck operation that is running 5 days a week, running commercial collections for a wide range of these materials. We find that it's certainly not unique to Boulder, but that every business has film plastic, every business has, well, a lot of them have EPS foam and electronic waste and on and on. And having that convenience factor of picking up directly from the source is a great way to intervene and recover those materials and keep them away from landfill, especially when we can offer this entire suite of materials to every one of those customers. So again, it's really primarily the residential side. We have, and I'll come to this in a second. I think one of the other things to say about fees, and I think this gets to Calvin's points, you really have to be careful that fees aren't a barrier to utilization of the site. So we are in a constant balance of achieving our goals as an enterprise while also making sure these fees are not so out of reach of our potential clientele. So there is a very strong effort to walk that tightrope. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, our goals here as a mission-driven organization are to recover the materials. That's first and foremost. The enterprise comes second. So a quick look at just sort of the realities of a CHARM-style facility. And this is held in my career over 3 different states and 3 different types of operations. But anytime you get into this sort of esoteric material universe, you're going to anticipate growth over time, right? So in 2001, it was a part year. It's really 2002, that 3940, that was our first full year of operation. We'll be back over 55,000 visits this year, and it just continues to grow. The couple of dips we see here, one is back in 2008, and that's the first year we implemented the facility fee. We actually implemented it. Part of the rationale at the time was to limit visits. So we didn't want people coming with a single plastic bag, a single bike tire. We wanted them to consolidate trips. So that's one of the genesis of that facility fee. And we saw a very steep decline in utilization. It continues to deter that, very small volume visit. But we just see more and more and more utilization as more people are aware of it, and also more people take advantage of the broader range of materials that we collect. Next piece here is just a glance at 2021 versus 2020. I think sort of universally, and I would hope this was heard generally across the board today, the COVID year, certainly here at Charm, was not much of a COVID year. Again, we saw a small dip, 5,000 people in site visits. That was really the month we were closed at the start of COVID. Otherwise, it's been a pretty standard year for us.
Justin, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And so again, to zoom in at this a little bit, the scales we're talking about here, we're at about 3.5 million pounds of material a year. Scrap metal is by far the largest commodity that we receive. I don't include that in this slide because it distorts the rest of it. But you can see some of these materials, it's very small volumes. Fire extinguishers at 5,500, that's actually per unit count. Cooking oil, 5,000 gallons of cooking oil, but some of the others, mattresses were well over, I think, 100,000 pounds. Books were in the range of 200,000 pounds. So it does become a pretty sizable operation pretty quick when you collect all of these unique materials and put them over, sort of the footprint of this site. So a couple of quick images just to sort of get a sense of how we collect things. And one of the unique things about Charm, we have a lot of customized containers. These are ice containers from a fish packing operation that were donated to us. We use them for fire extinguishers. This is a custom built system that we made last year for styrofoam collections, EPS foam collections. These are super sacks, which we're recovering from brewing operations here locally. The brewers receive grain in these bags. We've converted them to be collection devices for our foam program. This is a quick look down our lane here at Charm to give a sense. It's not a very big place to handle the volume we handle. And so one of my notes here is to say that anybody looking to explore development of a Charm, the golden rule of this business universally is build it far bigger than you think you need it, because eventually you will absolutely need it. And I think that wraps me up, Mark. And if anybody has any questions beyond this session, certainly feel free to reach out to me directly by email. EcoCycle, again, as a mission-driven organization, is happy to help and support others developing these kind of resources, whether it's to, again, stem an illegal dumping problem, which it certainly does, as infrastructure, or simply to intervene in waste streams headed to landfill. Thanks, Mark, and everybody else, Jeremy, Calvin, for the opportunity.
Thank you both for those great presentations. I know Dr. Lacken, he put a link to the white paper, that he was referencing in his presentation today. So definitely anybody that's in the session, feel free to go to that link. One of the first questions, I think it's from Pamela Egan. Justin, shredded paper is on your fee schedule. Doesn't shredded paper go into the blue bin? I'm assuming she's referring to the curbside single family.
Yeah, so here in Boulder, and this should probably be a universal truth in recycling. Shredded paper going through the blue bin systems is generally a problematic material. The paper shredding you see in our fee schedule relates to, we offer the service of shredding paper. So customers can bring a file box of paper to us to be shredded, and we have a NAID certified paper shredding service that manages that paper for us. But on the second side, where does shredded paper go that's previously been shredded? In our case here in Boulder, where the local sorting facility doesn't want that paper, we direct it and send it into a compost operation. So we do receive shredded paper as well as provide paper shredding. But that's one of those subcategories, again, of our materials at 24, it's more likely 34 or 40.
Okay. Next question this is also for Justin. Is there a separate fee schedule or sliding scale for low income residents?
It's a great question. And I think in the past year has been a big focus nationally and certainly here at EcoCycle. We have taken a different approach to break down barriers to access because we see barriers, fees are certainly a barrier, but transportation tends to be almost a bigger barrier to access to a site like ours. So we've started up a pilot program with the city of Boulder where the city is underwriting some of the cost to bring the fee and remove the fee from the question entirely. And then we're delivering the service in directly to communities to try to reduce that transportation barrier. So we can actually bring the collection point right into the neighborhood. It's a very tactical program, right? It's designed, and something we did when I worked in Pittsburgh, we started a similar program to really focus in on a neighborhood and to achieve the highest result possible. So we're not leaving orphaned material behind once we're gone. So it's a very intensive effort to try to get to it. Because again, transportation in any setting becomes a big barrier.
Okay. We have about 6 minutes left and a few more questions. This is also for Justin, what is in the trash category?
Another great question. The trash bin here at EcoCycle at Charm is a bit of a universal bin, so that number is a bit distorted. So I also operate our hauling operation, which has 10 routed service trucks hauling compost and recycling that generates contaminated bins, contaminated materials that end up in our trash here at Charm. It also handles our office waste and everything else generated on site. But by and large, it's either the contaminated materials, so the non-compliant materials in any particular category end up there, so residue and sort of the parlance of recycling. As well as we see our fair share of illegal dumping here. So materials we do not accept or aren't recyclable. They tend to appear in our, all over the site, frankly, and that is ultimately destined to trash.
Okay. Quick question for both speakers, and this relates to what Dr. Lacken was saying during his presentation about people wanting to do the right thing. And also with the Charm actual facility. I know in California with the recycling, our mattress recyclers, a lot of times they show up at the gate at the front of their facility at 5 or 6 in the morning, and there's 12 mattresses leaned up against the fence. And I'm just kind of curious, people obviously want to use your program in Boulder. Do you encounter the same thing? Do people want to do the right thing? They don't want to pay the fee, or they want to circumvent that fee, and then they just end up illegal dumping, in front.
Yeah, we see it routinely here. Charm is co-located with a building materials reuse organization, Resource Central. Between the two of us, we have a lot of people really trying hard to do the right thing outside of our business hours, and that leads to a lot of material out front. I will also say, and if anybody out there ever had the inclination, I receive packages in the mail routinely from across the country containing hard to recycle materials that folks are hoping will recycle for them. It's a similar kind of illegal dumping in a way that they're sending along little plastic blocks or widgets, and there's no facility fee paid, there's no material fee paid, and they're just crossing their fingers it gets recycled. We deeply discourage that. The U.S. mail is not a waste handling system, but it's part of it. We encourage the diligence and the attempt, but on the other hand, people, we need to build respect for these facilities, whether it's a recycling facility like this or even a solid waste facility that experiences a landfill that experiences the same problem.
Okay, couple other things. One person, I think it's Joni Burns, she said she would love to hear more about where everything is going. Particularly curious about film plastics and foam. Is there something that you can refer the group to show maybe some of your end market options that you use?
Mark, and I don't have that answer today. We are actually working on some more in-depth fact sheets per material because it's not just a group like this that is interested in the downstream of where materials go. That becomes a very important part of convincing people to use facilities like this. You can feel free to reach out by email. I'm certainly happy to connect you to markets. These are no They're certainly not trade secrets.
Okay.
Again, we would love to see more material recovered, diverted. So any way we can help.
Okay. Why is Charm a nonprofit rather than a for-profit business?
Interesting question. I don't know that I have a real answer to it. We operate again as a social enterprise. My responsibility is to run this as a business. It is our goal to cover our costs and to again generate a little excess revenue to reinvest. It's really in Boulder, it's a history that there was nobody else filling this space. Back to the curbside recycling in a school bus. And so we stepped out as an organized group of committed individuals and said, we'll solve it. And the best way to structure that at the time was a nonprofit. And we've been, sort of doing the same ever since.
Okay. Jane had a question, which I think refers back to what Joni's question was about concerning Charm collects hard to recycle items. But what do you do with them once they're collected? I would suggest also to Jane, reach out to Justin off this conversation, and I'm sure Justin will be able to answer those questions. And then from Pamela, why is shredded paper a problem in curbside recycling?
I'm happy to answer, Pamela. So the general issue with shredded paper and curbside programs is the modern sorting facility, the MRF. One of the first stops along the process is a glass breaking screen that size is anything smaller than 2 inches, falls through that screen and ends up as glass. So most of that shredded paper, if it's lucky, it ends up at a glass plant where maybe it's recovered, most likely not. And so it's generally lost into the system, as it were.
Okay. Well, thank you both. It looks like we have about a minute to spare. So I really appreciate all the great questions that we received and everybody's participation in this. I feel is very helpful. Definitely you can reach directly to Justin or Calvin about both their subject matters. This is why we come to these events, is to share information to make things better in our own communities. I'll turn it over. I think somebody just put the link here. I think it was Jeremy, just put the link for the main stage for the closing session. So if everybody wants to hop on that, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Calvin. Thank you, Mark.
Thank
you,
you
Jeremy.
both. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.